Can you tell us, can you break down for us what psychoanalysis actually is?
Yeah, psychoanalysis is, so everybody's familiar with like psychologists, psychotherapists, and I've found, I've been around psychologists, I've had them in my family. So I found that the way you approach a person's problem defines in many ways how you end up doing your work. In fact, yesterday on the call, I had this amazing opportunity to talk to, like, on my students called the Gauntlet, which is this big program we do where we dive really deep into the subconscious. There was a girl who brought up her biggest shame. And her biggest shame was actually sleeping with a family member of her partner. And that's something huge that you can embed the shame on. Now, when you go to a classic psychologist or psychotherapist, most of them are going to address the issue on the surface and say, what can we do about your shame? Like maybe take a medication, maybe work through this particular thing. For me, it's more important to understand why you did what you did rather than to make you focus on the what you did. Because that allows you to keep, when you focus only on the what, you keep your defense mechanisms high. You keep the shame high. You keep the blame high. And so you're not actually going deep into the what made me want to do it in the first place. And that's the only real way you can get into the subconscious and change acting in that way over and over again. So psychoanalysis is basically going really deep into the mind, deep into the subconscious. And if you're a good therapist, if you're a good psychologist, you'll be able to disarm someone's ego, which is the first thing that says, someone's ego can look like, oh, no, I didn't do this stuff. Or like, you don't know what you're talking about, trying to analyze me. Or it can try and be like a people pleaser, trying to give you the answer you want to hear from your client. Or it can be like the victim, being like, oh, no, my life is so sad and it's always bad. And like, people are always terrible to me. When you disarm that and go beyond, you find the little girl or boy inside the person who all they really wanted was love, validation, and support. Because they weren't able to get it through from their partner, because they weren't able to get it from the environment, the ego took them and make them do something that try to grab attention. Like in this case, maybe trying to connect with someone's family member. So when I go deep and I ask those questions, there's a process called compassionate inquiry, which is actually from this famous psychologist. His name is Dr. Gabor Mate. And it's one of the most important ways I think we need to adapt in modern therapy, which allows you to compassionately break down someone's ego to find out why they're doing what they're doing so you can change that. And that's true psychoanalysis. It's about going really deep. In short, it's trying to look at the story behind the story. Because the first thing everybody hears is the story. And everybody thinks that's the story. Everybody thinks that's the image you need to keep in your head. But a true psychoanalyst will be able to go behind the story behind the story. Why did you even need to behave in that way? That, I think, is so much more constructive for people because, like I told her yesterday, I don't even care that you did what you did. That's not what I'm here to analyze. What I'm here to analyze is why you did that so that we can work through that so you don't have to do it anymore. Otherwise, you live in a shame spiral of having it done once, done twice, done thrice, and then keep going down that loop. So...
That's so good and so powerful. I never knew the name for that. So compassionate inquiries. I've always been intrigued by a person's story behind the story. So when someone's like, shaming a person, for example, the one that comes to mind right away is, girls in high school. And there's a girl or college and she's sleeping around with everyone. And I always just stop and wonder, well, what is making her do those things? Not, oh my God, look at her, but what is the story for her? So that's interesting.
If people broke that down, they'd even go back to finding that when, girls develop much faster than boys. I actually put out a post about this on my Instagram yesterday. And what they need in their early teens, especially girls, is to have an extremely safe atmosphere at home, predominantly from the masculine, which is the father, because girls, when they get into their teens, get into the space where their bodies develop so fast, their minds develop so fast, they get very curious, but they also get very competitive with each other. Boys, if you look at us, like when I was in my teens, I was like, someone threw the ball on me. That's mostly like what we're like. But the girls develop so fast. And so because they're competing against each other, the possibility of shame, just as you said, is so high. But this girl, when she goes back home, if she has that place of safety, she develops in a more progressive manner. But if she has more constraints, like if she comes home and her dad's like, what are you wearing? That skirt is so short, starts to shame her, Now she goes back into those environments, and like you said, the sleeping around and etc., those become what we call coping mechanisms. They become ways to survive with the story that's in her life. In fact,
Mm.
Dr. Gabor Mate himself, he coined this term, which absolutely changed my work. And he said, there are no addictions. We look at addictions, and the moment you use the word addiction itself, you're unconsciously shaming the person who comes next. So you said you have a lot of, women on this space who especially are trying to work through their fitness, their wellness, etc. The easiest thing to do for somebody in their world is to shame them for eating too much, for not working out enough, for having coping mechanisms like maybe sleeping really late, or like any of those possible things, not doing the inner work. Someone who doesn't see the story behind the story is just going to be like, you're lazy, oh, you don't get it, oh, you don't care about your body, you don't care about your family, your kids, or you don't care about your look, like easy to shame. But a coping mechanism is just the way the ego uses something in our environment as a method to cope, to cope with something bigger deep down inside. So an addict, or someone who eats too much sugar, or someone who like does anything, even a work addict, which society is deemed healthy though, right? Because when you work too much, you're making money, which we valued. But even that's extremely unhealthy. You're using all of this to cope with something you're hurting from. My
Mm.
job is to be able to help you heal what you're hurting from, because then all the other shit will fall away really easy. You'll find inspiration to change the way you want to live.
Yeah.
So
Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.